The Toronto real estate market stats are out and we're finally seeing some trends starting to emerge for 2024. At least I'm getting a decent feel on what I think 24 is going to do for the remainder of the year. Now, obviously, I don't like going on gut feel. For those of you who follow me, you know everything is based on data, seasonal data, as well as recent data, and as well as what I'm seeing as a real estate broker here in Toronto and New York region. That being said, let's take a look. I think some things are going to be actually pretty surprising because we're seeing trends start to unfold as we speak. There are a couple of policy changes as well that they're probably going to impact the market. With all of this said, let's dive in and let's take a look what that means for the rest of 2024. So everybody's favorite graph, the seasonal price changes, seasonal norms, thin line, and 2024, the thicker dotted line. Between February and April, prices have been relatively flat. Usually during the spring market, this time we see about a 4% increase in prices. Here we've gone from 7 to roughly 8%. So what does that mean? The market is obviously underperforming relative to seasonal norms. And I don't see this getting any better. You're going to see right now why. What this is also telling me is we're likely going to relive a bit of 2023 in 2024. It's going to look a little bit different, but hear me out. Here's why. And before getting into the other variables, let's just have a refresher on what happened in 2023. Prices ripped up to about 16.5% by May of 2023. And then they ultimately ended up quote unquote crashing because this was a substantial drop. They went back to 5% gains since the beginning of the year. Right now, remember for 2024, we're right here. We're at about 8%. So we don't have these crazy peaks, but we're going to see what I feel is going to be a gradual wind down of prices all the way into the fall. Part of the reason why prices in 2023 ripped up as fast as they did relative to now is last year we had a massive shortage of inventory. Everybody was unsure what was going to happen with interest rates, so sellers were holding back their inventory. There was artificially lower inventory than we have now, and then what ended up happening is prices skyrocketed up until inventory started coming back on the market. We don't have this issue anymore because sellers have to sell, inventory is coming on the market. This is why the steam is out of price growth, and here's what's actually changing right now as we speak. So here's where the story gets interesting. Last month when we covered these charts, we had still seen that new listings were trending below seasonal norms. And guess what's happened now? New listings for April were pretty much where we are during seasonal norms. However, and this is the big issue, this is the issue that started happening last year, is that buyers weren't having it. Meaning listings would come on the market, but there would be less and less deals closing or actually going through. Meaning that buyers, they would put lowball offers in or they would be offering on places, but they wouldn't be, fighting themselves over every single property that came on the market. So with that, what ends up happening is properties end up sitting on the market. Sellers will dig their heels in and they're not going to sell for a discount. And this is where the standoff happens. So here, buyers are showing discipline. They're not going through with deals. And then what ends up happening is sellers end up sitting on the market for much longer. And at this point, it's a matter of who has staying power, which seller can actually hang on to their property versus who actually needs to sell. You have to keep in mind that a lot of people that wanted to sell in 2023 didn't. They waited until this spring market. I actually sold a couple of listings this year exactly in this exact same manner. And now you have other people that are coming on the market. And I think, unfortunately, if they're coming on the market now in May, the window of opportunity is starting to close. As we all know, by May 2-4, the market starts slowing down. And I'm starting to see the market slowing down right now, even before May 2-4. So it's starting to slow down a little bit sooner. And now that the data is here, we can actually explain why. Now, data without context is misleading. So as always, I love to provide data to make sure everybody understands what I'm talking about. So let's take a look at 2023 new listings versus sales so that we can see the pattern emerging back then in a complete year. You will see in June of last year, that is when new listings actually caught up to trend. And that's where we saw buyers start to pull away and deals weren't closing anywhere near the seasonal norms. Basically, people were just holding back. And this is common for buyer sentiment when they see more inventory coming back and they have more optionality. They're basically like, hey, you know what? Now I'm not in a rush. I don't really need to buy a house. I'm going to hang on until I either get a good deal or I get exactly what I want. So this is just typical sentiment. So we are at this phase right now. We're basically in the June phase, but it's happening much earlier in 2024. It's happening in April, May. So I do expect buyers to continue on this trend of holding back. And as we're going to the slower summer seasons, if you're listing now, you're likely going to be sitting on the market unless you adjust your expectations and you give a quote unquote discount to reflect the current market. This is where the real story happens for 2024. It's active listings. As you'll see, this is the seasonal norm for active listings based on 16 years of data. And this line right here is what's actually happening in 2024. Up until April, we were well below active listings. My gut feeling, if you watch my prior videos, is that I thought this may actually happen just based on seasonally more listings come on the market. But in this case, what's happening is, yes, we'll have more listings coming on the market. However, the real issue is that sellers that are not getting their expected price, either through bad advice, poor expectations, or just not being fully in tune with what's happening, they're holding on to their listings despite getting offers. And now what ends up happening is we have a buildup of inventory. And this is what's happening right now. And I suspect this number is actually going to surpass seasonal active listings after May is done, because there's a ton of inventory coming on the market. And this is something I've brought up in other videos, and even with my clients who transacted earlier this year, I urged everybody, get your houses ready now and list before the rush in May, because I suspected this would happen based on ground floor, call it gut feel. I will talk to other listing agents, other colleagues of mine that they're telling me, you know what, I have a bunch of listings coming out in May. And you want to get ahead of that rush, because you don't want to end up competing with every single person or every other listing at the exact same time. It's just not a position you want to be in. So if you can get ahead of it by a few weeks, you're doing great. You may leave some money on the table, but you also may actually reduce your downside, right? You just don't know. But why not take the sure thing? Some people took me up on that offer and they did well. Some didn't. Obviously, some couldn't because of timing. They weren't able to get their property ready. There's a bunch of stuff. But ultimately, this is where we're at now. I do expect May to be relatively flat price-wise. And then I expect a gradual grind down on prices for the rest of 2024, maybe a little blip in the fall market. But if inventory stays on trend like it is right now, and active listings continue to grow, and sales are way lower than they usually are, then for sure we're going to see prices coming down. Now, for context, this exact same thing happened late last year in 2023, where you will see in September going into October, this is where the active listings surpassed seasonal trends. And I got to tell you, I've made videos on this as well. October of last year, I had listings, and it was probably one of the most difficult times to actually sell anything. I think we had hit a record low in terms of deal flow. I think it was the lowest month on record last October in like 20 years or something of that nature. Extremely difficult time. So this is effectively what I do expect to happen coming up this summer. And let's take a look at what this did to prices in 2023. You will see right here, September going into October, prices just started going on a slide right down all the way until December, and then even into January. Obviously, I have no idea if that's going to happen now, but if I was to guess, based on what we're seeing right now, this is most likely on the table for us right now in May. Definitely in June. May may be flat, but June for sure, I expect this to happen. Now, the common thing you'll hear from clients is that if they don't get their number this spring, they're going to wait until the fall, and then they're going to list again. And again, if this was my own property, I would probably look at selling now in the spring rather than waiting for the fall, simply because I don't think the odds of getting a higher number are better in the fall than they are now. And anyway, that's just my opinion. And obviously this is really, it really comes down to the type of property you have, where you're located, and a bunch of other things. But generally, that is what I feel right now based on what I'm seeing. Now, what's actually interesting is just based on property types across all of GTA, the detached median price actually dropped, which is interesting. Generally, detached does the best, but not in this case. It's already starting to show signs of weakness. So detached is actually dropping as we speak going into May. Townhouses are up, likely because it's a lower price point. Semis are flat. Now, what's interesting is condos have actually been doing really well. And I'm talking about condos outside of the downtown core. So especially suburban condos, not bad. And then condos downtown are still getting decimated. They're going down. And they've been working basically overtime at being much below average relative to the rest of the market. And that's because there's a lot of completions coming on the market. A lot of units are available for rent. And speaking of rentals, even rent prices are coming down. I had 4 or 5 units up for lease. I've leased out most of them by now, but we had some really slow times in the last 30 days where nothing was moving. Showings were an all-time low. So very different. All the markets are changing, but again, it really depends on where you are, what type of property you have. So with that, that wraps up the analysis for April of 2024. If you have questions about your specific property or your area, feel free to reach out, and I'll see you in the next one.